Hi.
Hello everyone. We've done a couple of videos in the Who Really is the Faithful and Discreet Slave series. Videos 3 and 4 were on David Berceau, a recent acquisition that we're very pleased to get to know, an ex-Jehovah's Witness who is now a church historian and a very well-known one. And then we did one on Tom Wright, a New Testament scholar, maybe the most famous New Testament scholar in the world, who would be a great asset to any ex-Jehovah's Witness. And today we wanted to do one on Lee Strobel. So Tom Wright, New Testament, David Berceau, church historian. Here's another specialization, what is known in evangelical Christianity as an apologist. Now Lee Strobel doesn't make any scholarly claims for himself. His background, he was a legal editor for the Chicago Tribune back in the 1970s and 80s and was an atheist. And at this point he was just starting a family, and I guess he and his wife Leslie were then in their late 20s. And she became a Christian, and Lee was fit to be tied. The way he puts it now is he didn't sign on for this. So he had his career laid out, and he thought their life was laid out for them, and he's an atheist, she's a Christian, so what's he going to do? So he decides to prove her wrong. And in the process of proving her wrong, similar to our story, you decided to prove my new beliefs wrong and talked yourself right out of Jehovah's Witnesses. Well, Lee Strobel...
He does it the same way, by investigating.
Yeah, he did it the right way, being trained at Yale Law School and being a legal editor. He was in a very good position to evaluate evidence. So Lee Strobel starts thinking, for sure he's going to be able to find the evidence he wants to find.
Yeah.
But in the process, well, the title says it all. By 1998, actually by early 80s, he had realized that he was wrong and that his atheism was not a fair evaluation of the historical data. So by the time he had done his research around 1981 and become a Christian, and then several years later his life transitioned, he and his wife Leslie now being on the same page, he got around to publishing some books and then finally put this one out, which was a bestseller in the year 1998 and still is out there.
Laying out all the evidence that had been the process by which he'd come to faith.
Yeah, and his was far more, his search was far more searching than most of ours. He was leaving no stone unturned over. In his pursuit of truth. He was not wanting to believe what he was finding, and of course therefore kept searching even the more diligently. And the questions he was asking himself, which finally ended up in the pages of the table of contents here, are these.
And I would say he knew who to ask.
He found out who the experts were.
Yeah.
He wasn't going to be content with superficial answers, so he went to those in the field, in the various fields that he knew would be able to answer his questions definitively. Among them were the best, the most famous anyway, textual expert on the New Testament, that was Bruce Metzger, the famous archaeologist Edwin Yamauchi, and Ben Witherington, and D.A. Carson, who are first-rate New Testament scholars. This is the type of scholar he went after. Also William Lane Craig, who is a philosopher apologist who does many debates some of you will have seen on YouTube. He went to the best, and here's the questions he asked the best scholars he could find. Can the biographies of Jesus be trusted? Do the biographies of Jesus stand up to scrutiny? Were Jesus' biographies reliably preserved for us? Is there credible evidence for Jesus outside his biographies? Does archaeology confirm or contradict Jesus' biographies? Is the Jesus of history the same as the Jesus of faith? Was Jesus really convinced that he was the Son of God? Was Jesus crazy when he claimed to be the Son of God? Did Jesus fulfill the attributes of God? Did Jesus, and Jesus alone, match the identity of the Messiah? Was Jesus' death a sham and his resurrection a hoax? Was Jesus' body really absent from his tomb? Was Jesus seen alive after his death on the cross? And finally, are there any supporting facts that point to the resurrection? So when he published this book, it was thought to be, and I read it at the time and thought, yeah, this is about as good as it gets when it comes to documenting the reason that Christ is different than all other saviors, and that why the Christian religion is called Christianity. It centers upon this man and his case, that is the case for his not only his teachings, but his death and resurrection specifically, are the reason that there is a Christianity. But he knew, even when he wrote this book, that there'd have to be a follow-up, because people's problems about Christianity don't end with Jesus. So 2 years later, he publishes this book in the year 2000, The Case for Faith. And I'll just read you the back cover of this to show why he felt he had to write it. But despite the compelling historical evidence that Strobel presented, many people grapple with serious concerns about faith in God. As in a court of law, they want to shout, "Objection!" They say, if God is love, then what about all the suffering in our world? Or, if Jesus is the door to heaven, then what about the millions who have never heard of him? Or, if God cares for everyone, then why does he eternally torment some in hell? In The Case for Faith, Strobel turns his tenacious investigative skills to the most persistent emotional objections to belief, the 8 heart barriers to faith. The Case for Faith is for those who may be feeling attracted to Jesus, but who are faced with intellectual barriers standing squarely in their path. For Christians, it will deepen their convictions and give them fresh confidence in discussing Christianity with even their most skeptical friends. And of course, you can see why this would be valuable for ex-Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yeah, because you may still believe in the person of Jesus when you leave the Watchtower, but I think a lot of witnesses, it seems, lose their faith in God, falters when they leave the Watchtower, and then they start thinking about the objections that you oftentimes do find in non-churched people.
Yeah.
Questions about, well, he actually has 8, right?
8 objections.
8 objections that are commonly put out as, there can't be a God. And I think
barriers to belief.
Yeah, I think this happens to a lot of ex-witnesses. So the first objection is, since evil and suffering exist, a loving God cannot. The second objection is, since miracles contradict science, they cannot be true. And objection number 3, evolution explains life, so God isn't needed. Objection number 4, God isn't worthy of worship if he kills innocent children. Objection number 5, it's offensive to claim Jesus is the only way to God. Objection number 6, a loving God would never torture people in heaven. And objection number 7, church history is littered with oppression and violence. And objection number 8, I still have doubts, so I can't be a Christian. So I think as an ex-witness, some of these things might become an issue now as to whether or not you're going to pursue even looking into the claims of Christianity, because you kind of think you have them as a witness.
Yeah.
But a lot of the stuff you've been taught to believe wasn't based on the claims of Christianity, really.
No. Your faith as a Jehovah's Witness commonly is, especially if you're born in it, is all filtered through the Watchtower. So their credibility takes down everything.
Yeah.
And maybe for the first time you've got to reevaluate all of it.
That's right, because you've already blackballed everyone outside of the Watchtower. So you just throw the whole thing out.
Yeah. Now, Lee Strobel couldn't have known, of course, in 2000 when he publishes this, that a year later a lot more is going to be up for grabs, and religion is going to be in the headlines for, years to come. Because, of course, in 2001, 9/11 happens. And not only that, but suddenly there's a new raft of atheism, and very aggressive atheism, the so-called new atheists, who are coming forth with the argument that religion is worse than not true. It is actually dangerous. And they're using, of course, 9/11 as well as American fundamentalism as an argument against the merits of religion at all. So not only that, but you've got the rise of Islam, not just the political events that gave birth to 9/11, but also the immigration crisis as Islam becomes far more visible in the Western world. And then you've got at the very same time the Da Vinci Code and the fog of misinformation that followed upon its success, tens of millions of copies, and then the movies come out, and suddenly this stuff is everywhere about Christianity not having credentials, and somehow that
people are believing what was written as a fiction, as if it were
fact,
truth.
because it is kind of presented as fact.
Yeah.
In the Da Vinci Code. And even we found Christians even that were buying into this stuff, and to be truthful, a lot of the comments that we get on our channel reflect this influence.
Yeah.
So by 2007, Lee Strobel felt compelled to put this book out, The Case for the Real Jesus, and these are the questions that he felt he had to deal with in the wake of what had happened since 2000. These are the new truths that were now out there in the public sphere that he felt he had to contend with. He calls them in this book not objections but challenges. Challenge number 1 is scholars are uncovering a radically different Jesus in ancient documents, just as credible as the 4 Gospels. And of course this is a response to things like the Nag Hammadi texts, the Gnostic Gospels, that some people, including the Da Vinci Code, are publicizing as somehow having more credibility than the 4 Gospels in the Bible. Challenge number 2, the Bible's portrait of Jesus can't be trusted because the church tampered with the text. Again, a claim of Muslims and a claim of the Da Vinci Code. Challenge number 3, part 1, new explanations have refuted Jesus' resurrection. And part 2, the cross-examination of the witnesses in the Bible and elsewhere. Challenge number 4, Christianity's beliefs about Jesus were copied from pagan religions. This is in the wake again of these claims that are in many documentaries that you can find on YouTube and elsewhere, but also a book that came out in the early 2000s called The Pagan Christ, written by an ex-clergyman, by the way, from Canada, I'm afraid to say. Challenge number 5, Jesus was an impostor who failed to fulfill the messianic prophecies. This is a claim of many aggressive conservative Jewish rabbis, that somehow Jesus couldn't be the Messiah because he didn't fulfill the Old Testament prophecies thoroughly. And challenge number 6, people should be free to pick and choose what to believe about Jesus. Another excellent book by Lee Strobel. And we're pleased to report there's lots on YouTube.
Yes, so we think that people should do some sampling. You know, you might want to do some sampling before you read books. If you're not a reader particularly, you're going to find that this is good. And on YouTube, there are interviews with Lee, and we're going to link an interview with Lee and his wife. Plus, there's also a movie that's been made about their life journey, how he came to faith and her coming to faith. So I think if you watch those links, you may be inclined to either want to go see the movie,
and hopefully read the books.
And eventually get to the books, because they're well documented, and there's even a DVD that you can get that has the first one.
I think what's valuable about Lee's ministry is he has no illusions about his own scholarship. He goes to the best guys out there. As a legal editor with a training in law, he knows that's the best way to evaluate any evidence. So he doesn't trust in himself, and he certainly never trusted in a religious organization. He went to the experts.
So if you sample him, you'll get some other people to sample too.
Many of whom are on YouTube as well.
Right.
So we'll put the links in at the end of this video, actually on screen, and also in the description. So that's Lee Strobel.
Good.
The Case for Christ, Case for Faith, and the Case for the Real Jesus.